Week 1 of the Cleveland Browns 2023 season starts now. Browns, Bengals talk. Jeff Lloyd, Pete Smith, your latest Locked On Browns starts now.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound LGB on the LOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Your host, Jeff Lloyd, joined today, Sports Illustrated's Pete Smith. It is week 1, boys and girls. It is Cincinnati Bengals week. Browns, Bengals, home opener for Cleveland, Sunday, 1 o'clock. I appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. The everyday crowd just continues to grow. Best way to join the everyday crowd is by being subscribed to the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Of course, the show is always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. We're going to get into it a little bit here, starting off here, Browns, Bengals. Obviously, everybody knows this rivalry well. Each team, there have been, some changes, upgrades possibly considered. This team, the Cleveland Browns versus Cincinnati Bengals for the last few years, certainly during the Joe Burrow era. And just to let everybody know, watch out for it. It appears Joe Burrow is going to sign a massive extension somewhere in the next couple of days. And if I'm Joe Burrow, I would not be taking another snap on the field for that franchise unless I knew I had my money coming. But Pete, this has been something during the Burrow era. And, and it's not obviously knocked Cincinnati off their course, off their path by any means whatsoever. This team, the Cincinnati Bengals, has made it to 2 straight AFC championships, winning one of them, going to a Super Bowl. But there's just this, it's a weird thing. It's a karma. It's a whatever. But in the NFL and any sports whatsoever, and maybe Pete, firsthand from Friday night, obviously with your Streetsboro program, sometimes things just don't work. Sometimes things just don't match up. And over the last couple of years during the Joe Burrow era, even though the Cleveland Browns have not been the most successful franchise against the Cincinnati Bengals, it's always a week where the Browns look like they're on the top of their game. Even their deficiencies play, almost into positives. So every time these two teams face, it's a real difficult battle for the Cincinnati Bengals because the Browns, there's just things that they do well. And some of those things they have accentuated even more this year that should play well.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a combination of, rivalry, division, and then you go lower levels, conference and all that stuff where just familiarity breeds contempt. And there's, those type of games just have a natural tightening to them. And there's also just a rock, paper, scissors element to it. The Browns have invested heavily in their corners. And when they're good, they've been able to limit what the Bengals receivers have been able to do. And then the fact that the Bengals offensive line hasn't been great. The Browns have been able to generate pressure on Joe Burrow, and that combination has been effective because even when the Browns couldn't stop the run particularly well, the Bengals weren't great about making themselves anything other than one-dimensional. So that becomes a problem. On the other side of the ball, for as good as the Bengals defense is, and Lou Anarumo is a phenomenal defensive coordinator, the balance the Browns are able to often strike has been problematic for them with Nick Chubb and then being able to use play action to create plays in the passing game. And in the past, the Browns have just formationed the Bengals into some disadvantages at times. So those things adding up allowed the Browns to do some good things. And you see the Bengals, and particularly Joe Burrow, with a 1-4 record, which seems, probably it seems weird and hard to understand. But you actually watch the games, you sort of get it.
You're definitely sitting through, 60 minutes of it, watching back the second time. And the other thing is, for the Browns, they've also been smart about this in the games where they've been successful. Obviously, the 4 victories, you get out in front. And, for the Browns, the pass rush, it's always been the key. It's always been good against the Cincinnati Bengals, even though maybe the players themselves haven't been inferior compared to maybe what the Browns are trotting out this year. But there's the importance of this, for everything that is invested into this Cleveland Browns season here in 2023. And this, look, it goes back to last year with Deshaun and all the money there. All the moves you made to satisfy bringing in a top-end defensive coordinator like Jim Schwartz, making sure you returned your offensive line intact, making sure you doubled down on the $230 million investment in Deshaun Watson by getting him not only Elijah Moore, but Cedric Tillman, but also Marquise Goodwin. The Browns absolutely need, and look, that streak breaking it last year was great, but it's a game they barely won, which was a joke, of itself, because they should have rolled that Carolina team that, last year in week 1. They need this because it's a statement to everybody else that everything they did to this roster, everything they brought in is going to all of a sudden, and quiet down a lot of the national media, but it's going to show that, all of this that has been done can hopefully translate to the ultimate, what everybody is based on in the NFL, and that is wins.
Well, it's not different from how the Browns approached the Eagles joint practices, where that first day they really wanted to prove that they belonged, that they were like worthy of being in that matchup, and they did that. I don't doubt that the Browns are going to have a similar mindset with the Bengals. Obviously, the stakes are different. The game counts. The divisional game counts, and the conference game counts. All those could play a role. And then the Browns play a difficult schedule. Or the early part of the schedule is difficult. So they need to come out to a good start. There's a lot of pressure on Deshaun Watson and some of those other things. And then the rest of it is largely just living up to what they were last year, like the running game, like Amari Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones and David Njoku and those type of guys. They just play as they were able to last year. The Browns are going to be in good shape, but the Browns are certainly better, have more options with Elijah Moore, with Deshaun Watson, and then the defensive line bolstering everything the Browns are doing. It continues to push the Browns further into being a problematic matchup for the Bengals. If they can stop the run, force the Bengals into obvious passing situations, and pin their ears back and get pressure on Joe Burrow, then they've got a great shot to cause turnovers, to get stops, and to win the game.
And there's no question. And now I've gotten into this and, episodes I've done this year during the off season and, Bengals fans. And look, guys, the Browns were always a problem for you. It did not, again, alter the Bengals' path. But the things that the Browns did that were successful in this 4-1 record against Joe Burrow for Cleveland, it's more of they accentuated the positive and eliminated the negative. And we're going to get to that here. Segment 2, segment 3, joined by Pete Smith, your latest Locked On Browns. Appreciate everybody for being along for the ride. Football season kicks off this Thursday, and there's no better way to get in the action than with Underdog Fantasy and their pick'em game. Just pick between 2 to 5 players, select whether they'll go higher or lower on one of their stats, then do what you usually spend kickoff night doing, watching the game. You can win up to 20 times your money in a single game by going 5 for 5. It's a fantasy game, but you can win real money. It's legal in over 30 states, and it's a ton of fun. If you want to build your dream team today, head over to their easy-to-use mobile app or website, UnderdogFantasy.com. When you sign up with the promo code LOCKEDON, and not only will Underdog double your first deposit of up to $100, but they will also have a Pick'em special live now in their Pick'em lobby. Patrick Mahomes just had to get 1 yard for your pick to be correct. Remember, that's Underdog Fantasy. Sign up with promo code LOCKEDON. Use the link in the description or scan the QR code if you're watching us on YouTube. Your latest Locked On Browns, your host, Jeff Lloyd, joined by Sports Illustrated Pete Smith. I appreciate everybody who makes the show their first listen every single day. Join the Locked On Browns everyday crowd by being subscribed to the Locked On Browns YouTube page. Always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, doing some episodes, and, this always happens, where other fan bases get into your work, which is, hey, it's part of the gig here. And, no, Jeff, the Bengals upgraded their offensive line. They brought in Orlando Brown Jr. The Cleveland Browns brought in Dalvin Tomlinson, Shelby Harris, Zadarius Smith, Ogbonnaya Okoronkwo, Isaiah McGuire is a rookie, Alex Wright, which was a surprising thing to get him back at practice the other day. But Pete, you can't just say you brought in Orlando Brown Jr. and it looks like, for all intents and purposes, Jonah Williams or Lael Collins is going to be at right tackle. Collins had a pretty good year for the Bengals last year. But just bringing in that one player, and this is a defensive line, even when the Browns' defensive line was porous, and that is it's probably as nice as we can talk about them last year. This is now, well, it's great. I mean, you brought in one thing, but it was like you fixed the trim work in your house. But meanwhile, there's holes in the wall. The outlets don't work. And yes, this offensive line works against other franchises, but it doesn't work against one within their own division.
Look, Orlando Brown's fine, but he's never done all that well against Myles Garrett, for example.
Negative.
That's the problem, is you can get almost anyone in there, and they're not going to be good against Myles Garrett. He's just inherently a disadvantage. But Jonah Williams has routinely struggled against the Browns. He struggled against Isaiah Thomas last year, and now it's Zadarius Smith off the edge. It's Obo Okoronkwo off the edge. And then you have the ability to line up Zadarius Smith on the inside. You have guys like Maurice Hurst you can launch from the inside. Dalvin Tomlinson can be a problem on the interior. Shelby Harris is more than competent as a run defender on the interior. The Bengals can't hide a weakness. So if they've got a guy who's not particularly good, the Browns can take advantage and exploit it. So overall, it's a lot of pressure on that Bengals front. And it just provides the Browns with opportunities. Again, if the Browns can stop the run, if they can force obvious passing situations, or the Bengals just decide we're going to throw it all the time anyway, it's going to give them a lot of ability to attack the quarterback, potentially put hits on the quarterback, and take a toll. And if they get pressure, they cause stress, that whether that's a fumble, whether that's a bad throw that results in an interception, those are all going to be opportunities for the Browns to either get off the field, get a turnover, or just otherwise get stops where they're not giving up points and their offense can get another shot to build a lead.
And look, I mean, we all know that Joe Burrow, and we've all known that Joe Burrow is playing in this game. And, whether or not he is 100% or he's not 100%. And, he doesn't have to be 100%. He's Joe Burrow, for God's sakes. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But, Pete, this is not basically the week. You'd like a cupcake, to kind of get your legs under you, to start, okay, you know what? My calf is okay. I'm all right. You know what I'm saying? Because whatever Cincinnati's doing with him in practice is obviously all, with the whole intent and purpose of to try to get Joe some work in, but to make sure Joe doesn't deal with any adverse situation where he might be putting any stress on that leg, but this is not the week. And the way this Browns defensive line is, and also keeping in mind that has always been an issue when this team has played the Cleveland Browns as far as the Browns getting pass rush on Joe Burrow, this isn't the best week for Joe Burrow to basically come back and take his first live bullet since January.
Yeah, it's not ideal. There's a number of factors that the Bengals may not want to run out there for game one. I would say their defensive backs stand out. They've got young safeties. They've got a second-year corner who they're very high on, but he has to see how it goes when it's real. You've got Cheeto coming back, Awuzie from a knee injury. That's another question. How good does he feel? So those are big things for them. They've tried to upgrade their pass rush. They haven't really seen a whole lot from their rookie first-round pick, and they just lost Osai for a while, so they may be hurting on the pass rush to start the season. So there's a lot of things that could potentially result in some problems or, not be something that's ready for game one. The flip side of that is the Browns, they need Deshaun Watson to be effective now, and that's pressure for him to deliver. They've got a number of players that are going to have to step up potentially in new roles. We still got to keep an eye out on Denzel Ward. Are they going to need to play somebody else as that third corner? That could be some pressure. But just the defense in general looks good so far, but even in the preseason was giving up some chunk plays on third downs and stuff like that. So there's a lot that needs to work right away. And then the bigger thing I think that stands out for the Browns is special teams. And obviously everybody's going to be focused on Dustin Hopkins and what he does in the kicking game. But to this point, the Browns special teams just hasn't looked good. they've been tweaking the roster. They've been doing a whole lot of things with that. They haven't had the guys that they want returning. Nevertheless, that's one of those things where you're sitting there going, I hope it's better with 2 weeks of practice than it has been in preseason.
Yeah, that is one here. And actually, I'm going to throw this one to you now. The way this final 53 was assembled, Pete, with a corner kept because of his special teams ability, a safety kept because of his special teams ability, a linebacker kept because of his special teams ability. And obviously, with Adams, obviously a relationship with Bubba Ventrone. Were you a little surprised that many guys were? And for me, I think part of it is this early schedule and how difficult it is. But were you surprised that so many guys were kept with the thought process of they were core special teamers? Look, I get it. And, as far as that respect, but, you could have risked, and the Browns didn't. Anybody they released was not picked up right away. So they had the opportunity to bring them back. But were you surprised that guys were kept to this roster due to the fact that they are just essentially core special teams players?
No, I thought Michael Ford Jr. was going to make the team.
He was fair, yeah.
Once they traded Josh Dobbs, I thought D'Anthony Bell was a lock. And I should have expected that when Jordan Kunaszyk went down, that cleared away from Matthew Adams. The only my big hang up with Matthew Adams was honestly, I thought they were going to try to do what they did with AJ Green, which was, here's your chunk of guaranteed money. We want you to get to the practice squad and do that from there. But they opted to keep him with Kunaszyk injury. That makes sense. I get it. So ultimately, no. But now the pressure's on for those guys to deliver in a way that's going to benefit the team. Obviously, D'Anthony Bell was really good for the Browns on special teams last year. Matt Adams has been effective for Bubba Ventrone in the past. He's also had last year, I think, was he with the Bears, where he was god-awful. And then Michael Ford Jr. at least advertises himself as the gunner stopper or whatever. So you got to have those things make an impact. Donovan Peoples-Jones. The biggest question I have had with this whole thing and Jakeem Grant was, were they secretly like trying to make him be the only returner, and that's why they were sort of holding things back? I'm not sure. I guess I'm inclined to doubt it, that Donovan Peoples-Jones was sort of always the backup plan, or the main plan with that, and that Jerome Ford healthy and now potentially Pierre Strong, that could work too. But just the amount they seem to put on that last preseason game stood out as slightly strange to me. And then obviously he gets hurt, so they have to go back the other way. But that odd, or at least a little bit unclear as to what they really wanted to do.
Yeah, the whole Jakeem Grant thing. That was it was a nauseating experience. Just knowing from what a guy went through for a whole calendar year, and there's nothing worse basically being separated from your team while you're rehabbing from a serious injury. And then you go from one that might be even more serious. And for Jakeem Grant, we will have a couple of glimpses, a couple of still shots in any video we have on Jakeem Grant for his time here with the Cleveland Browns. It's heinous. The NFL, it's a tough business. It's a rough business. Obviously all the best to Jakeem Grant. And, most likely, we've seen, what we were ever going to see of him for his time here in Cleveland. But we'll see how it does play out return-wise. And the Browns may end up with what was actually a really good thing for them last year as far as a punt returner. And it wasn't supposed to be the plan, but sometimes, things dictate, because originally it wasn't DPJ. It was supposed to be Felton after the Grant injury. And Donovan just, you saw glimpses of the true athlete he was, maybe playing with more confidence. But, these were things he did and did well at Michigan. Now that he's more of an established player, just part of the repertoire here. And with the deep wide receiver room, you can probably risk him doing some of those return duties. We're going to get to segment 3 here, talk a little bit about the Browns offense against the Cincinnati secondary, because there are a lot of changes there in that Bengals secondary, and they broke up not one, but both pieces of what was a really, really good safety tandem. We're going to continue on here. Your latest Locked On Browns, Jeff Lloyd, Sports Illustrated's Pete Smith, along for the ride. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether prepping for a draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So with the draft prep underway for the upcoming season, let's see who Vinny has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. If you're looking for a player to take in fantasy football drafts who will spark his new team's offense and also help you speed to victory, then use a luxury pick on Jaguars wide receiver Calvin Ridley. Ridley has looked sleek during his first camp in Jacksonville and ready to rev up again after his time in Atlanta, taking full advantage of riding with rising Trevor Lawrence as his quarterback. Vinny Iyer from Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win your fantasy championship in eBay Motors. Knows the championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. With eBay Guaranteed Fit and over 122 million parts and accessories for your vehicle right at your fingertips, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Air filters, brakes, batteries, taillights, alternators, shocks, struts, you name it, eBay Motors has it. And they'll make sure it's the right fit for your car because eBay Guaranteed Fit helps you understand exactly what part you need for your vehicle the first time. So go forth, switch gears, crank the AC, and say goodbye to sweating if your ride needs a little fixing up. Because now you know you'll always be set up for success from the get-go. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Your latest Locked On Browns continues on. Segment 3, your host, Jeff Lloyd, Sports Illustrated's Pete Smith, along here with me. Appreciate all of you for making Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. Join the everyday crowd by subscribing to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. And, of course, Locked On Browns is always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, Pete, the one thing, and it didn't actually deter this team that much, obviously, in their matchups with the Browns versus Joe Burrow holding a 4-1 record, there was a deficiency as far as wide receiver rooms. I don't know if the Browns wide receiver room is there yet because the Bengals is by far one of the best in the NFL. But the more playmakers in the room, and Elijah Moore, which is going to be a player. And now you're going to have, brand new safety starting for the Cincinnati Bengals. No more Jesse Bates, no more Von Bell, who was an extremely underrated player. And there's going to be some difficult situations. Elijah Moore is going to be a guy that lines up everywhere. And in addition to being this guy who can do slot things, can play outside, can do some things out of the backfield, you can give him the ball on jet sweeps, can do the jet sweep, the jet motion, all those things. He's a guy that you kind of have to make sure you know where he is, and you have to make sure he's accounted for. But in the same respect, you can't really just go crazy and shift coverage to take out Elijah Moore because you still have Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Cedric Tillman possibly, Marquise Goodwin possibly, David Njoku, and a guy who's owned you to the point of 5.9 yards per carry in Nick Chubb.
Right. It's been a very weird conversation to hear people go, are the Browns relying on Elijah Moore too much? Because they had...
A lot of it can be for show.
Well, even if it isn't, you got 1,999 yards out of Donovan Peoples-Jones and Amari Cooper last year combined with 36 explosive plays, I believe, off the top of my head, and 12 touchdowns. Like, it's only going to add to the things you do.
True.
And it's going to force the defense to account for all these other things. So, yes, as you mentioned, you still have to account for those receivers. You still have to account for Njoku, and you still have to account for Nick Chubb.
And that's not counting a mobile quarterback in Deshaun Watson, but go ahead.
And yes, that's going to be a big part is like if the Browns do a lot of things, which would make sense, they spread it out, they empty out the backfield. We'll see. I'm very curious to see how much running back blocking they do in pass protection. I think it's going to be more chips and release type thing, but we'll see. Only because Deshaun Watson tends to be, almost crowded by running back blocks in the backfield. But either way, that all empties everything out, and then you've got all these guys covering, and if you're wrong or you do things like you play too high, you're going to create open running lanes for your quarterback to just pick up yardage with his legs, hopefully slide comfortably, and get up for the next play. That's a major benefit you have. So these are all things you have to account for. And yes, the Bengals, they have players, they've refilled that room, but how good is Daxton Hill? Difficult to say based on last year, and I can't speak to what the Bengals have done in camp. The veteran they signed from the Rams, my opinion, frankly, stunk. So I don't know what that's going to really mean. And
the only reason, and I remember, Pete, he had a great pro day, and it was like all of a sudden, well, can he play? Because his athleticism was off the charts, but it was like, can he play? And, look, we've already had buyer's remorse from getting safeties from the Los Angeles Rams.
So I have no idea what he's going to bring. I know Cheeto's a great corner, but, obviously the knee injury, and then Cameron Taylor-Britt is very intriguing. I know the Bengals are very high on him, but is he going to be ready to go right away, or is he going to have some second-year growing pains because it's such a difficult position to play? Difficult to sort of project a matchup you'd like to say favors the Browns just in terms of skill versus their secondary, even though, I'm not going to suggest that the Browns are on the level of the Dolphins or the Bengals, but what I would say is about the receivers is Amari Cooper is a genuine number one. And then the pieces they have fit really well together in terms of what they do skill set wise. Like DPJ was a very good third option last year, and now he's going to be a fourth option. What does that mean for him? Is he going to pop off to a point where he's going to have a great season and people are going to be arguing about, why he's having such a great season, which is a good problem to have? Or is he going to sort of disappear a little bit because they've got all these other toys to play with? I mean, you and I have always talked about this. The Browns offense always cooks when the quarterback could just throw to open guys. And if they just take what's there, it just flows really well. 2020, especially particularly the second half of the season, that's all Baker Mayfield did. And they just pinged all the way down the field with guys like Rashard Higgins catching it. They've got a whole lot of talent that's a lot better than Rashard Higgins. So that all suggests they can go well. And even in the preseason game where, against the Chiefs, you've got Amari Cooper catching deep balls, and I get it's against backups. You got David Njoku in the corner. You got all these different weapons that can do all these things. It's a lot to account for. And then, yes, they can just decide we're just going to pound you with the football. And I'm hoping that with what the Browns have, that they spread them out when they do it and create some what should be lighter boxes for Nick Chubb to just feast on.
All right, just the last one here, and real quick. Pete, Hassan Hall obviously to the practice squad, but the realization is God forbid something happened. This team right now is relying on two running backs who combined have 17 carries in the NFL.
Yeah, I really like what I've seen from Pierre Strong, but obviously, yeah, it's a huge risk to have
compared to what they had last year and ended up, that obviously Hunt didn't really perform. They probably didn't use Dearness as much as they needed. And you're banking on upside here, but whew.
Yeah, look, I look at Pierre Strong as a more polished Hassan Hall. He's got genuine speed, 4.37 coming out, good size. He's got good agility. He runs decent pad level and power. Not a guy you want blocking for you, which is a trend with what they seem to be doing with some of these guys. I think Jerome Ford is going to be expected to do most of that heavy lifting, but even so, I think the Browns are sort of leaning into the idea that they can be Mike Shanahan and just get guys that Reuben Drones is going to show up and get you 1,200 yards, or whoever it is, you just fill in a guy and ultimately he's going to get yardage. Now the difference is that Chubb is that dude that's going to be able to be a superstar, and these other guys are going to do just enough to keep it going and maybe have some nice plays, but they're not going to be they're not going to replace Nick Chubb. They're not going to be in that neighborhood. But as long as they can continue to move the offense, and we get games like Dearness Johnson against the Broncos, or some of those type of matchups where the offensive line is able to do some work, and then the backs just got enough talent to work hard to create yardage that allows you to bounce off the offense. But again, this is another situation where the presence of Deshaun Watson is supposed to make things easier for the running game.
Absolutely. And, if it is a concern, it is. And, and as, Pete and I, we talk all the time, and the biggest concern you have is, look, you have to speak in facts, and there's not enough information to say that, Jerome Ford and Pierre Strong Jr. are good. There's not enough information to say that they're not good. So until you know one way or the other, it's something you do have to think about, and that's something that definitely gives you a little pause and hesitation. He is Pete Smith, Browns Digest Sports Illustrated. Pete and his team put out phenomenal phenomenal work. You get a ton of work each and every day. You get your quick news hits. You get more in-depth type of stuff, podcasts, everything. So if Sports Illustrated Browns Digest is not part of your rotation, make sure it is. Make sure you're following @_Pete Smith _ our conversations pick up this kind of time of year between Pete and I. A lot more messaging back and forth here. Number one, I like to peek in on Pete and his high school program. But, we just, it's the old theory of, are you seeing this way? If you're not seeing this way, or, why do you see it this way? Why do I see it this way? Certainly one of my favorite people to talk to this time of year as we are about to tee it up for real. I'm your host, Jeff Lloyd. As you guys all know, this is now my 7th season, Locked On Browns, covering the Cleveland Browns for you guys. It's been good. It's been bad. Let's hope that, the best is certainly yet to come. I appreciate all of you who make Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. Again, join the everyday crowd. It just keeps on growing. Subscribe to the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Of course, the show is always available. It's always free wherever you get your podcasts. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on the LOB. Let's go, Browns.